Imagine you're at work. It's 1945. Somewhere in a Massachusetts defense lab, you're surrounded by classified military equipment, radar systems, the most advanced technology in the world. You reach into your pocket for a snack, and you pull out a melted chocolate bar. Most people would shrug it off, clean up the mess, move on. But one man in that lab didn't shrug it off. One man stopped everything, looked at that melted candy bar, and asked a question nobody in history had thought to ask in quite the right way. And because of what happened next, because of one curious orphan from rural Maine who never finished the 5th grade, the entire world changed how it cooks. We're talking about a device that's in over 90% of American homes right now, a device that reshaped family life, enabled working parents, fed generations of college students, and found its way into every country on Earth. And most people have no idea who invented it, where it came from, or what it cost the man who discovered it. That stops today. I've been digging into this story for a while now, and the more I pulled on this thread, the more extraordinary it got. Because this isn't just the story of an invention, it's the story of what happens when you put an insatiably curious mind in the right place at the right moment, and what this country is capable of when someone refuses to accept limits on what they're supposed to know. Let me take you back to the very beginning, because to understand this invention, you have to understand the man. Howland, Maine, 1894. It is about as far from the corridors of power as you can get, a small farming community in the middle of a cold, quiet state. Percy LeBaron Spencer enters the world here, and almost immediately, life deals him an impossible hand. His father dies when Percy is barely 18 months old. His mother, unable to cope, sends him to live with his aunt and uncle. Then, when Percy is just 7 years old, his uncle dies too. Just like that, an orphaned boy and his widowed aunt are left to travel the back roads of New England, surviving on what she could earn from weaving and whatever odd jobs a child could find. This is the kid who would one day change how the world eats. But none of that is visible yet. None of it is even imaginable. By the time Percy is 12 years old, he's done with school. Not by choice, by necessity. His family needs income, and he goes to work in a spool mill, up before sunrise, working until dark. No future engineer's degree, no prep school, no mentor in a well-funded laboratory pulling him along. Just a boy with a restless mind and zero resources, doing the only thing available to him. And here's the part that gets me every time I think about it. He refused to stay ignorant. He just refused. At 16, Percy hears that a local paper mill is going to be electrified, brand new technology for rural Maine at the time, and he volunteers to help install the system. He has no training, he has no credentials. He just starts asking questions and learning by doing, the way people did when survival depended on figuring things out. Electricity becomes his obsession. Then, in 1912, something happens that shifts everything. The Titanic sinks, and in the aftermath, young Percy Spencer becomes transfixed, not by the tragedy itself, but by something remarkable buried inside it. Wireless radio operators, using a technology barely a decade old, were able to direct a rescue ship to the survivors in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. Radio had helped save lives. Percy Spencer, already fascinated by electricity, decides he wants to understand this. He enlists in the US Navy. He tells them he wants to go to radio school. There's just one problem. He never finished elementary school. So he does the only thing he knows how to do. He teaches himself. Standing watch at night, by the light of whatever he could find, he works through textbooks on his own. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, engineering. He later described it simply, "I just got hold of a lot of textbooks and taught myself while I was standing watch at night." That quote has stayed with me. No self-pity in it, no drama, just a man building a bridge to where he wanted to go, one page at a time. By the time Percy Spencer joins a small Cambridge, Massachusetts company called Raytheon in 1925, he is already a quietly formidable engineer. He would go on to become one of Raytheon's most important people, one of its earliest employees, and over the course of his career there, he would earn well over 100 patents. But his most critical moment, the one that would echo through the rest of human history, was still 2 decades away, and it required a war to set it in motion. When the United States entered World War II, one of the most urgent technological needs of the Allied forces was radar. Reliable radar was the difference between detecting an enemy submarine or a German bomber in time or not. The core component of radar was a device called a cavity magnetron, which generated the high-frequency radio waves that made the whole system work. The British had invented a sophisticated version of it, and the United States was charged with mass-producing it at scale. The problem was that Raytheon, where Percy Spencer was now a senior engineer, could only produce about 17 magnetrons a day. 17! For a war that needed hundreds of thousands of them. Spencer looked at how the magnetrons were being made, tore the process apart, and rebuilt it from scratch. By stamping and soldering the parts rather than machining them individually, he transformed the production line entirely. Output went from 17 per day to 2,600 per day. According to historical accounts, Raytheon ended up producing the vast majority of magnetron tubes used by both US and British radar forces during the war. American bombers equipped with Raytheon radar were powerful enough to spot enemy submarine periscopes from the air. The head of electronics at the Navy's Bureau of Ships, Commodore Jennings Dow, stated that Raytheon radar had a marked effect on every major sea engagement of the war. For this work, Percy Spencer received the Distinguished Public Service Award from the U.S. Navy, the highest civilian honor the Navy can bestow. He had built one of the most important manufacturing breakthroughs of the entire conflict, and he wasn't done. 1945. The war in Europe is winding down. Percy Spencer is working in a Raytheon laboratory, standing near an active magnetron, the same kind of device he had spent years perfecting for radar, running experiments on electromagnetic waves. He reaches into his pocket, he pulls out a candy bar. It has melted completely. And here is the exact moment that separates Percy Spencer from everyone else in that lab. Every other engineer who had noticed something similar in proximity to magnetron equipment had chalked it up to coincidence or body heat or ambient warmth. They observed and moved on. Spencer observed and stopped everything. He looked at that melted candy bar and thought, why? What just happened? As Joseph Schwartz, the director of McGill University's Office for Science and Society, later put it, others may have made similar observations before, but never capitalized on them, while apparently Percy did. He cited Pasteur's famous line, "Chance favors the prepared mind." Percy Spencer's mind was about as prepared as a mind gets. The experiments began immediately. He sent someone out to get unpopped corn kernels and held them near the magnetron. They popped, every single one. He and a colleague then tried an egg, placing it in a pot near the magnetron. The egg exploded, covering his colleague in a mess that was both disgusting and, Spencer reportedly understood at once, deeply instructive. Microwaves were penetrating the food from the inside out, heating it faster than anything a conventional oven could do. Spencer quickly built what would become the world's first microwave oven, a metal box into which he fed microwave energy from the magnetron, trapping the waves and concentrating their heating effect on whatever food was placed inside. On October 8, 1945, Raytheon filed a United States patent application for Spencer's microwave cooking process. The patent, for what Spencer called a method of treating foodstuffs, was officially granted in January of 1950. In 1947, Raytheon introduced the first commercially available microwave oven, which they named the Radar Range, a combination of radar and range, the latter being an old word for a cooking appliance. If you're picturing something like what's sitting on your kitchen counter right now, let me reset that image entirely. The original radar range stood nearly 6 feet tall. It weighed around 750 pounds. It required an internal water cooling system just to operate, and it cost several $1,000s, equivalent to tens of thousands of dollars in today's money. This was not a home appliance. This was a piece of industrial equipment that made its way into restaurants, railroad dining cars, ocean liners, and military installations. Anywhere that large amounts of food needed to be prepared quickly and where the cost was justifiable. And here's where the story takes a detour that most people don't know. For years, the microwave oven was considered something close to a failure by many in the industry. Raytheon's own chefs found that while the microwave cooked food with stunning speed, it didn't brown meat, it couldn't crisp French fries. The textures were wrong in ways that bothered professional cooks trained on conventional heat. Percy Spencer's grandson, Rod Spencer, later recalled that the early microwave became known as Raytheon's largest commercial failure, not because the technology didn't work, but because nobody could figure out the right market for it. They had the cool technology, Rod Spencer said, but they didn't understand where it fit. This is how revolutions often start, not with a triumphant debut, but with years of confusion about what exactly they are and who they're for. The real shift began in the 1950s when Raytheon licensed its patents for a home-use microwave developed by the Tappan Company. But even that model was still large and expensive by the standards of an average American household. The true democratization of the microwave oven came in 1967 when Amana, by then a division of Raytheon, introduced the first compact countertop model designed and priced for the American home kitchen. It sold for just under $500, which was still a significant investment at the time, but within the reach of the American middle class in a way nothing before it had been. That machine, small enough to sit on a counter, fast enough to change the rhythm of daily life, was the beginning of the transformation. The adoption curve that followed was one of the most remarkable in the history of consumer technology. According to historical data, by 1975, microwave ovens in the United States were outselling traditional gas ranges. By the mid-1980s, they were present in more than half of all American homes. And today, according to available surveys, more than 90% of American households own a microwave oven. This is a device that went from a 750-pound machine that required water cooling and cost a small fortune to something that sits in virtually every American kitchen, every college dorm room, every office break room on Earth in less than 40 years. The National Inventors Hall of Fame estimates there are over 200 million microwave ovens in use worldwide. All of them trace back to one melted candy bar. All of them trace back to one man's refusal to let a strange thing stay unexplained. And now, we get to the part of the story I want you to sit with for a minute. Percy Spencer, the orphan from Maine, the boy who never finished 5th grade, the self-taught engineer who helped win a war and then accidentally changed how the entire world cooks, received $2 for his patent. $2. That was the standard gratuity Raytheon awarded employees for patents obtained by the company. Not a share of the profits, not a royalty on every unit sold. $2. He never profited personally from the invention that would go on to become one of the most globally widespread cooking technologies in human history. He retired from Raytheon as a senior vice president, which tells you that the company valued him enormously as a professional. But the money, the billions of dollars that the microwave oven industry would eventually generate, that was never his. Percy Spencer died in 1970, just as the microwave oven was beginning to find its way into American homes at scale. He never got to see the full size of what he had started. He was inducted posthumously into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 1999, almost 2 decades after his death. The building he spent so much of his career in at Raytheon bears his name. But walk into any kitchen in this country, or in Japan, or Germany, or Brazil, or South Korea, and you're standing near something that exists because of him, and most people couldn't tell you who he was. This is the kind of thing they should teach in every school in this country, not as a footnote to a chapter about World War II, but as a story in its own right. Because what Percy Spencer represents is something genuinely American, in the best and most honest sense of that word. Not the myth of the lone genius in a gleaming laboratory with every advantage behind him. The real version, a kid with nothing, who refused to stay ignorant, who taught himself physics standing watch in the middle of the night, who looked at a melted candy bar when everyone else looked away, and who changed the world because he simply could not stop asking why. That's the thread that runs through the most important chapters of this country's history. Not born lucky, not born connected, born curious and too stubborn to quit. There's a quote I keep coming back to from an MIT physicist who worked alongside Spencer. He said that Percy Spencer earned the respect of every physicist in the country, not only for his ingenuity, but for what he has learned about physics by absorbing it through his skin. Through his skin. That image hasn't left me since I first read it. A man who absorbed an education the hard way, from factory floors and Navy watches and late nights with textbooks, until the knowledge was just part of him, as natural as breathing. That's who invented the microwave oven. That's the American who changed how the world cooks. So the next time you open that door and press those buttons, whether you're reheating last night's leftovers, or making popcorn on a Friday night, or defrosting something at 11 p.m. because life got away from you today, maybe take 1 second to think about the orphan from Maine who figured it out, who got $2 for it, and who, against every odd you can imagine, became one of the most consequential inventors of the 20th century without ever finishing elementary school. Now I want to hear from you. What other American inventions do you think most people don't know were American? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of your answers have already become future videos. If this story moved you, share it, because that's exactly how forgotten stories finally get the audience they deserve. If you want more American history that never made it into your textbooks, subscribe and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one.